me. Got your coffee ready and everything.
Yes,
Perfect.
everything is ready here. Water and coffee, everything to get, a bit waking up. Can you hear
So,
me?
yeah, well, everything, you sound great. You're not looking at camera at the moment. That's it. Here we go.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chat box, and then I think there
Uh,
are so many comments. It will be here. It will be loading the comments, but
yeah,
I'll be looking at the.
we have noted the chat box. When you ask a question into the chat box, it flies by. So be prepared for that. And of course, questions are going in the Q&A box, so we can bring those to you
All right,
later
thank you.
on. So don't worry about questions per se. Paul and myself and the team will manage those for you. Okay, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the IATF British Council World Teachers Day Jamboree, as we've decided to call it, and this is talk 3. So if you've missed the first 2 talks and you are just joining us, don't worry, they have been recorded. They will go up online, and you'll be able to see them later on. But talk 3, as I said a few minutes ago, we're going over to early morning Brazil to introduce you to Tamires, who got a bit hijacked. She originally requested to do a little webinar for IATFL, and coincidentally, the webinar she was going to do fell on World Teachers Day. So we said, "Hey, do you want to come to a bigger audience? Would you like a few more people?" And when she said yes, her punishment was that we put her on at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is not that nice of us. So if you've never met Tamires before, she has been teaching English online for 4 years. So the current climate isn't that new to her. She runs her own business called Simplificar, and the last little,
Simplifica, yes.
and the second part of that, go on, because my Portuguese is terrible.
Okay.
So solus.
Soluções.
Oh, nearly. So she holds a B in languages. She's got a CPA, she's got a CELTA, she's got a TESOL certificate from the University of Anaheim in California, and she's also knows and done certificates in teaching online. So she's pretty well qualified, she's pretty well experienced. She's spoken about online teaching before, and she's here today to talk to us at the World Teachers Day Jamboree about establishing connections that go beyond the screen. So enjoy the talk, and over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I'm really happy. And then by mentioning Sarah, I'm really thankful for being here today with you, learning a lot from the speakers and then learning a lot from the comments. And then it's a pleasure to be here today. And I know that there are some friends here I could see from the comments. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tamires, but you can call me Tammy. And I've been teaching online for 4 years. And it has been a profitable journey, but with some ups and downs. And then today I'm here to share with you some of the things that I have done and then some of the things that I have implemented in my practice as an online teacher. Most of my students are adults, and I've got more one-to-one students than big groups. I've got some small groups, and today I brought some ideas for you that have helped me. So don't think that this is going to be like a session, 10 steps for you to become a really successful teacher. I'm going to invite you to reflect on your practice as online teachers, all right? And I run my own business. This is my business logo. And then if you want to drop me a line, if you want to ask me anything, feel free to contact me on Instagram. And I brought this picture that really illustrates how I feel about being an online teacher. A bit crazy at times, but when you look at me, I look a bit beautiful and then calm and all collected, but I'm not. On the other side, I'm a bit crazy about being an entrepreneur, about being an online teacher. When I started teaching online, it was at about the beginning of 2016, and I didn't know anything. For me, online teaching was something really new, something about the future. I thought that I would be able to deliver nice sessions the same way that I did with my face-to-face lessons. But, you know, that chunk, little did I know, things got really complicated. I felt like a failure. I felt my students weren't. And then I also received these kind of comments from my coworkers. They were not online teachers, but we used to work together at this school, at this language institute, and they used to say, online teaching is boring, it's difficult, students don't learn. But on the other hand, they thought it would be the future of education, the future of language teaching. It was very difficult for me to hear these comments coming from people that I really admired because they had very little knowledge in online teaching. So what I needed to do was to research a little bit. And when I typed on Google online teaching, I found these two quotes that they kind of represented how I felt back then. The first one, it spoke really deep to my heart, because I thought that students, they had more flexibility, but I didn't know, I was not equipped to teach them in the online environment. And then I felt like this, that without proper preparation and guidance, students, it would hinder their learning process. The second quote that I brought for us today, it is that some teachers, they feel ill prepared, and we are not ready to give up the control of the classroom. So whenever I was teaching online, I felt like this. I felt that I couldn't control my students, that I was not in charge of the lesson, I was a bad teacher. And then that's when I decided to read more. Because by reading and sharing more things, I believe that my professional development and then my development as a human being has really become better. So by participating in events and by sharing with my coworkers and by sharing with other peers that were delivering sessions online, I became a better person. So these kind of events, they're really important for me. So because this in 2016 and 2017 was when I really decided to be in charge of my professional development. Before that, I thought it would be my coordinator's responsibility to do so. But when I became an online teacher, nobody was there for me to say, Tammy, you should take this course, you should take that course. So that's when I started reading more and participating and taking more part into these kind of events. So then in 2017, it was the first time I got in touch with this piece of research. Although this piece of research, it is about higher education, there were some factors, some success factors that might be useful for us as teachers of young learners, teachers of adults, teenagers. I brought some of this research. Actually, you can find it online. It's pretty easy to find. It is a 20-page article, and then I believe that we can benefit from looking at it and then taking a look at how can we implement these success factors in our lessons. Some of these principles, actually, some of these factors, they have helped me. Actually, they have guided me to make better choices in my online classes. So the thing is, the first success factor mentioned by these two researchers, it is about technology. I was expecting it to have many tips about technology, how you should set up your hardware, but it's not about it. The only factor that they mention about technology, it is the first, and then I'll share with you. They mentioned that students and teachers who were interviewed to make this research to happen, they said that they felt better when teachers or the institution provided them with asynchronous and synchronous instruction. And the students, they really liked when teachers, they tried to be a bit more present, not only by sending messages and checking if they have done their homework, but the way that the kind of relationship they had with technology. And this is something really important because some of my students, they have lots of difficulty dealing with technology to study. So whenever they come to me, as I am a one-to-one teacher, they have a needs analysis moment with me. And then I always ask them, how do you usually use technology to study? First of all, do you use technology to study? Do you use your cell phone to study, your tablet? What is your relationship with technology? Because we tend to think that students, they come with this digital culture, or their families have provided them with some instruction. But some of them, most of my students, they didn't. It was the first time they were having online classes. So before the pandemic, some of my students were more reluctant to have online classes. Nowadays, I believe they are convinced that it works, but most of them, I could see that they had very little use of technology to study. The most time they were using it to talk to friends and then to send messages, to watch YouTube videos, but they didn't see themselves as learners using technology to study. So this is the first thing. And also, two other factors that they mention in this research is the technology that you use with your students, it needs to be friendly and dependable. So something that I really focus nowadays, it is on my learners' experience, how they are going to complete the tasks. Is it going to be difficult? Do I need to grade the instructions? Do I need to break down the instructions? I'm not going to use this website because it is too difficult for them. So if I have difficulty using a website platform, I just don't use it with my learners. I don't want them to, I don't want to make them more anxious. And this is an important point, because some of my learners, they feel that by using lots of apps or lots of websites on the same day at the same lesson, they feel a bit lost. Also, some of my learners, they don't have the same access of technology that I have. So their broadband is a bit low. They don't have a computer to have the lesson. Sometimes they take the lessons using their phones and a laptop, but this laptop doesn't have a built-in camera. So I really needed to think about which kind of, which device they have to have the lessons. So then I can plan better sessions for them. Because if my learners, they take the sessions with me by using their phones, how am I going to ask them to be so interactive on the board with me? So this is something that I really take into account when choosing the apps and when I design my sessions. The second factor that they mention in this research, it is about pedagogic factors. So this has helped me so much when choosing the materials, because I also take into account, is this a collaborative tool? How about this course book? How can I make it more interactive? Is this app feedback oriented? Is it learner centered? Some of my students at first, they had this idea that online teaching was something really passive, that they would be there just watching the session with me. They wouldn't take part into the process. And I take them by surprise sometimes, because they work so much by collaborating, sharing documents with me, collaborating on the same document. They get really surprised. So I believe that the name of the talk today, it is establishing connections that go beyond the screen, because I missed the contact with my students. I missed seeing them face to face, but I wasn't forced to start teaching online. It was one of my choices. So when I decided to become an online teacher, well, it was something that really bothered me. I really wanted to see my learners. I thought they would think that I would be very distant, it would be very cold. But then by using it, by paying more attention to these elements in my lesson, I believe that nowadays my lessons are a bit more meaningful. Learners, they feel that we have a better connection together. So these are some of the principles that I use when I need to choose a new website or a new app to work with them. Moving on, the third factor has to do with leadership factors, and it has to do with us teachers. When I first started teaching, there were many courses. Then you could apply, enroll, take, it was like 10 weeks just learning about online teaching. But I felt really overwhelmed. Every week there was a new tool, there was a new app, there was a new way to teach, a new platform to design the lessons, and then it is tiring. It is, not only for teachers, but for students. One of my students, she dropped out the course, and then she told me that I was trying too hard. Every class there was this new app that she needed to learn about it. Every class, so it was too much for her. So I decided to read a bit more about how can I make my learners feel that they belong to this online world. Because some students, they believe that it doesn't work because they haven't received the proper instruction or guidance. And also they feel that online classes are not for them. So it was it was something that really happened to me when I first started, because learners, they thought that they would need to be really tech savvy. And I thought that I would need to be tech savvy as well as a teacher. But my surprise was that focusing on less apps or on fewer tools was better for my students. And then I believe it has to do with these leadership factors, because when it comes to professional development for online teachers, we do have lots of courses, lots of tools, but we needed to be more selective. So nowadays, as I told you before, these principles and these factors that I'm sharing with you today, they help me to make better decisions. Also, my students, I noticed that they needed some support when starting the lessons. So we have this day zero for those who have never taken online courses, where I teach them like the step-by-step how to plug in their mic, if they have any problem with their cameras, if their connection is really low, I ask them to turn off the cameras. So sometimes I share with them the links before. So at the moment of the lesson, if my connection is not good, I ask them to play from their computers. So it works really well for me. As I told you before, I am a one-to-one teacher, and then I teach small groups. But being this supportive teacher has helped me to overcome this fear of technology with them. Actually, it is a constant confrontation for me because I'm not a tech-savvy teacher. I understand some basic stuff, but I'm not that resourceful when it comes to what would you say, but then hardware, to fix hardware problems, but I can provide what my learners need. And the students from this research and teachers, they mentioned that they felt better when students felt they would be the ones to help them. I know that it's hard to be this support teaching staff when the teacher himself or herself doesn't have much access to technology or have very limited resources, but that's what I try to do with my students. I try to minimize some of the problems and anticipate some of the problems. So what I do is when I'm teaching, I don't open many tabs because my last computer was not that powerful. So I noticed that whenever my page got really slow, my learners, they tended to feel anxious. You know, when the person is just looking at somewhere else, the person is not focused on the lesson. So I noticed that when I minimized these kind of problems, my lessons got better. So nowadays I try to work everything on the same board. So I don't change tabs, I don't send many links to them, and then I try to do so. Then moving a bit, the fourth factor was about the course factors. And it took me by surprise because they mentioned structure and organization, quality content, clear goals, and the last two, motivating and challenging. So how can I communicate the learning goals to my learners? How can I make it a bit clearer for them? Nowadays, what I do is I try to send them lesson objectives. So whenever we have a lesson, I try to organize it into describing past habits, or instead of saying that we're going to learn on simple past, or even discussing the importance of entertainment instead of saying vocabulary lesson. So some of my learners, they get really clear goals on what they have to do. I've got some proficiency students, so they are also communicated in which way they're going to develop them. And the last two factors, they're a bit tricky because motivating and challenge, we needed to know our learners. So at the moment of the needs analysis, I try to ask them, what did they really want about this course and how I can help them. But also I decided to include a feedback moment for every lesson. So when I structure my classes, I make sure that my learners, they know which kind of moment we are in the lesson. So if it is a listening moment, they have a listening icon, or if it is a feedback moment, I bring a feedback page for them. So they are really aware of what they are expected. So I believe it helps them to work on their motivation, and if they need this constant sense of progress, they can go back to my annotations in the classroom. So it is a way for me to communicate what I really want from them, what I expect from them, but also to keep them motivated. It is something interesting that some adult learners, especially the intermediate learners that we know that they reach this plateau, some of them complain that they miss the challenge. But then when you increase the challenge, some of them say that it is too hard for them. So I use those feedback pages that I mentioned to you to keep asking them to look at their own sense of progress. So this way, I believe that they are part of the process as well. One of the factors that I mentioned before was that the lesson and the sessions, they have to be student-centered and feedback-oriented. So by including every class a feedback moment for the learners, I'm catering for one of these success factors. And the last but not least, it is the human factor. And here again, we see that they mention motivation and attitude. When I I believe that the last thing that came to my mind when I started researching about online teaching would be human factors. We were so much focused on the hardware. Which computer should I have? Which headset do you have? And then softwares that we tended to, to turn a blind eye to the human factors. The first time that I bought it, actually, I didn't buy the book. I got this book from a dear friend of mine. She went to Liverpool last year at a telephone conference, and she gave me this book on online teaching. And there was a quote, online teaching is still teaching. It struck me when I saw this quote, because I was so much focused on buying apps and that I didn't have a good computer, that I didn't focus on the students. And here again, we can see that they mention motivation and attitude. Also, something that is really important, it is your learning view and your technology view. When it comes to your learning view, I decided to research a bit more. How can I communicate my learners? Let me rephrase it. How I will communicate my learners the way they're going to be assessed. So how are they going to be assessed? Do they expect me to give a grade for each Google Classroom assignment that I give to them, or are they going to be assessed every day? How am I going to organize a course where my students, they have this sense of progress? Do they perceive the sense of progress? So these are some things that really get me when I think about my learning, my teaching style, my learning view. So I believe that my students learn better by using collaborative tools. Other teachers, they choose to have a very structured course where learners are going to have a mini test or a very short assessment each 15 days. So I believe that you should communicate that to your learners. And also your technology view. It is something that I've been researching a lot about. So as for technology view, I've been trying to learn how to go a bit further on the use of the tools and then apps that I have here. I believe that one person that I really research about it is Dr. Ruben Puentedura, and then he has the summer model. It helps so to see if I'm on the level of substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition. So here, teachers, they needed to be aware of the use of technology. Am I implementing this just for the sake of using it, or do I have a clear goal? Is there going to be any functional change if I implement this app or that app? Why am I asking my learners to type in a Google Docs if they could be typing on the chat box? But if I'm using Google Docs with my learners, why am I using it? Am I catering? Am I fostering? Am I boosting autonomy? Am I asking them to go a bit further and provide peer correction? So these are some of the questions that I always ask myself, because it is time consuming to plan lessons. So if I'm going to use, for instance, if I'm going to use Genially to put my sessions together, it takes me a lot of time. So I go to another platform, which is Google Slides, to put my sessions together, because I know that I can include moments for my learners to collaborate with me. If I just use it Genially, there will be a beautiful presentation. It looks great, right? But the thing is, are they going to benefit from me? Are they going to benefit from using Genially if they cannot collaborate on the board? So these are some of the questions that I always ask myself. Then, moving a bit, all of these factors, they made me think about the way that I was delivering the sessions and the way that my learners were feeling about the online instruction. And I remember that in 2017, I studied a bit more about crashing because I was taking CELTA. And one of my tutors, I believe it was not the first time that I've heard about crashing, but he mentioned again that students, if they were really anxious, if they had if they didn't understand the instructions, we were working on CCQs and ICQs on this day at CELTA, they wouldn't learn. And then he explained about the effective future hypothesis, how important crashing it is for second language acquisition. And then I remember this quote that we were reading, that people would acquire language if they obtain this comprehensible input, and the affective future would hinder their learning process. And I was thinking about my practice as an online teacher. Some of our learners, they are really anxious about being online. It is something really new to them. So then I decided to rethink actually about the way that I was delivering the sessions. If my learners, they were kind of stuck in one of these affective filter actually items, because there are some things that are the affective filter is made of. Something that can influence on our learners' production or the outcome of our instruction might be motivation. And I was thinking about my students. Why are they taking online classes with me? For me, it was an opportunity. For many learners nowadays, we know that we don't have any other option. So what motivates them to keep coming to the lessons? What can motivate them to open their camera? Because it is actually, this is a complaint that I've heard from so many teachers. I decided to investigate a little bit more. Some learners, they don't really want to open the camera, but other learners, some of them, they told me why. Some of them, they were camera shy. Some of them were afraid that their background was not beautiful, or that some of their friends would make fun of the place that they take the sessions, or some of them, they had a very bad self-image, and they were not confident to speak to a camera. And this is something a bit tricky, because some learners, they don't like opening their cameras, but we should investigate. Why don't you want to open your camera? Some students of mine, they didn't have a very nice place like this one to have the classes. So they thought it was not beautiful. They didn't want to see it. They didn't want the other friends to see it. So I decided to investigate a bit more. The second factor here about self-confidence, self-image. Some learners, they were taking the classes with me because it was their last resort. They said to me, I've tried everything, you are my last resort. I want to take classes with you, and then I'm taking online instruction because I believe I was not born to speak English. So it was something really major for me. And then I received this responsibility as a teacher. And how would I work with that? Also, the attitude. Some learners, they thought they weren't tech savvy, so I needed to convince them that they didn't need to be that tech savvy to have the classes with me. With some basic instruction, they would be able to take the sessions. And one of the last factors would be anxiety. And what triggers anxiety for some learners is the fact that we use it too much in only one day. So nowadays I try to go for simpler classes, and I try to cater for this element of the student-centeredness in my lesson. So are they going to be able to type? What if they don't have a computer to take the class? Am I going to include everybody if I include this game? Because I remember once I was taking a course. It was not an online course, but we needed to use our cell phones to be able to perform one activity. And my cell phone was not good at the time. And then I felt so left behind. My friends, they had a good cell phone, and then I could pair with them. But then there was a group of 7 people, and then I was not able to see the answers on their cell phones. It was a Kahoot game. And then I got a bit traumatized because the teacher didn't have a plan B if a student's cell phone didn't work. So I felt a little bit left. And it is horrible when you feel left out from the class, because you're not able to share, not able to exchange ideas. So I always think about my learners when I'm planning a lesson. Are you going to be able to participate? What if it doesn't work? Do I have a plan B? What is my plan B? Am I going to assign this as a piece of homework? How am I going to grade this? Because some students, we assign homework, we forget to grade, or we didn't plan for the grading, and they expect us to grade because they have invested their time and energy for that. So I try to look for this reason, what the rationale behind using this tool. Moving a bit. So then, how can I help my learners to lower their affective filter? When I first started delivering my sessions online, I had no idea that one thing would trigger this anxiety from the learners. And When we think about online teaching, being aware of the use of hardware, software, and liveware, especially this last one, will help you to lower your learner's affective future. So as a teacher, you don't need to have a very, a high-end computer, a very expensive one. Make do with what you have. Nowadays, everything is really pricey due to there are some corona prices nowadays, COVID prices. So everything is really expensive. So you shouldn't go to a store, to the next store and buy everything. So make it do with what you have. I know that cameras, webcams, they are a bit more, expensive nowadays. But if you have good lighting, if you change the position of your camera, you don't have to spend a lot of money to do so. So you shouldn't buy many things. And this is something that I've learned from experience. I've already spent so much money on hardware, and then nowadays I don't use the things that I bought. Mics, I bought such an expensive mic, and then I didn't use it. It was not compatible for my computer. So try to focus on what matters. Now I believe that less is more. If you can make do with what you have, and if you think about the software, you need to take some informed decisions. Why are you using this software? Did you inform your learners? Why? Some of my students, they are businessmen, businesswomen. They don't like to play games that much. I like to play games. So whenever I present them with an activity with gamification, or it's a game-like activity, I tell them why we are doing so. So how are they going to benefit from taking this activity with you? I believe that having clear goals, it is important for students and teachers. So then you don't lose track trying to plan that beautiful game that will take 10 minutes of your lesson, but you needed to deliver a 60-minute session. So I've been there. I've already spent so much time planning one game, and then we spent 10 minutes playing. So if you really use websites, games, different add-ons to your sessions, make them worth it, because it takes our time. And as for this last factor, liveware, students try to investigate a little bit more. What is their relationship with technology? Do they use it to study? Are they used to use it to study? So it is something that I've been investigating with some of my learners, because sometimes they don't know how to use technology to study. They don't know how to use WhatsApp or other websites to study and to focus. Some of my students, they say that they feel really distracted when they're studying by using their phones. So we tried to have a plan B with them. So whenever I ask them to record their voices, to send me a voice message, I ask them to go to other websites where they can record, focus on recording, and then send it to me. So, but then I know my learner's profile. Moving a bit, something very important that and then I noticed that my learners, they like, it is when I bring my personality to the class. So whenever I welcome them to the lesson, or if I am providing feedback, I welcome them to this kind of room with a living room, like a sofa, where they can sit, they can have a moment to decompress, they can have a moment to chat a little bit with me. I used to go straight to the point. I used to say, hi, hello, let's start the lesson, but it doesn't work like this. So, and also when I'm providing feedback, or when I want them to focus on something important, I have this board, this old school board, and they really like it when I bring these offline elements to our online sessions. Something that has really helped me as well, it is netiquette. So my students, they are well aware of the rules and regulations from our course. I ask them to have their computer or their phone charged. I ask them to take the sessions with a headset if their background noise is too loud. So by talking to them and by teaching them a bit about netiquette has helped me as well, because I used to expect a lot from my learners. I thought that they would need to know how to behave, and they don't. Not only kids, but also adults, they don't know how to behave in front of the camera. Some of them were taking the sessions while they were watching TV, or while their family members were watching TV. And then it is something that really distracts them. So I try to talk to them about this netiquette that we have, about being late, what I expect from them as well. It is of the essence. So when I begin the course or while I'm delivering the course, I kind of remind them of some of the things that we have talked before. And then I believe it is important for us to have a toolkit, to stick to some apps for a while before we move to others. Otherwise, I know that we have to experiment. It is trial and error, but by sticking to some tools or sticking to some apps for a while will give you you become more confident, and then you will be more confident to change the apps that you have. Nowadays, my main video conference, it is Zoom. I really like it because I can interact more with the learners. I have access to the whiteboard. These two others are Webroom and Whereby. I like them very much. If things don't work, I go to WhatsApp. So I send them the lesson and then we log in on a WhatsApp call and it works. The last resort. And then when it comes to lesson preparation and then the boards that I use nowadays, my main board is Google Slides. I usually use it in the edition mode. I don't use the presentation mode because it is a way for me to type in comments, to bring links, to bring pictures for the students. The second one that I like the most, it is Gama. So then you can edit PDFs, you can teach your learners how to do the same. You can keep track if the students have logged in into your page. So if you needed to ask them to maybe perform a test or something like this, you can give them the link, they can edit on this PDF. After, if their time is over, you can change the link, you can make it a restricted link. So you also, if you needed to time your learners, it is a way for you to do so. If you have lots of PDF files, it is great because you can transform them into collaborative documents. Remember, some of those principles that I shared with you before, they help me to make these decisions. This third one, it is awesome. It is not a collaborative tool, but it is a way for you to make a portfolio for your students. So I highly recommend taking a look at Book Creator. For young learners, teens, or even adults, I used it with my adult learners. We created a book for them. The fourth one, it is Quizlet. I believe it is a nice way to keep track if students are building up a vocabulary bank. I teach them how to do it. And this last two, Wheel Decide, it is the one that I like very much, which there is a wheel where you can put some names, and Wordwall. Something that I'm really careful about is whenever I use Wordwall, I try to use it, go a bit further. So I'm not just using Wordwall to ask my learners to memorize or to elicit if they have memorized, just to ask them to drag and drop. I'm trying to use it in a broader way. So why am I using Wordwall? Am I using Wordwall just to ask them to fill in the gaps? So what is the function of change then? So I try to, whenever I use Wordwall or Wheel Decide, I try to go a bit further. How can I cater for language stretching the language with them? How can I work with the collocations? Can I work more with the synonyms? So this is what I've been trying to use. And Google Classroom, what bothers me about Google Classroom, it is that in the past I used it just to put information for the learner. So you will find this link on your Google Classroom. Nowadays, I'm trying to establish more meaningful interactions with them. So whenever they have posted their pieces of homework, I try to write a comment, I ask a question. There's always this follow-up, especially for A1 and A2 students. So they can see, why am I delivering my sessions? Why am I handing my work on Google Classroom? Otherwise, if you don't have this meaningful interaction with them, they're not going to see the use of the platform. They're going to ask you just to send things by email. or just to open a Google Drive folder for them or for the course. So nowadays I've been trying to have more meaningful interactions with them there. So whenever I'm teaching, I ask them to complete the tasks on Google Classroom. So I assign some short tasks for them so then they can do it while I'm teaching. I refer them to the page and then we share screen, they type in, I provide feedback so they can also see that it is a meaningful platform. Then I believe that by sharing and taking part into these events has helped me a lot. So there's this Google Classroom that I have with other teachers. If you want to take part in this Google Classroom, feel free. There are some materials that I've shared there. There are some websites where you can find more inclusive pictures, pictures that cater for more diversity in the classroom, because this is something really important as well. And also some tips on how to use Book Creator. There's the website. So I believe by getting together with other teachers has helped me a lot. So if you want to take part into this Google Classroom class, feel free to do so. This is the code. You can use this one. And if you need to talk to me, or if you wanted to take a look at some pieces of research about online teaching, I've read these books and these articles. They were really helpful to me. If you want to ask me anything about my lessons, or if you want to vent your feelings about online teaching, feel free to reach me on Instagram or by email. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here with you this morning. If there's any question, please let me know. Sean, do we have questions?
Oh, we have a lot of questions.
Please.
But first of all, I think I'm gonna address. There is a question on this, but it's also been through the chat box and it's gone wild on the Facebook page. How on earth did you make those slides?
This is slides. Well, I've used Genially. And then when Genially, I believe they're just icon at the bottom of the page. Genially.
Oh yes, yeah, you can see it.
Yes?
The bottom left hand side, yes.
Yes. So I like it very much. But then, as I told you before, I use it when I have presentations or when I wanted to reuse the lessons. But when I'm teaching some students, I go more for Google Slides. But then I can use both together. Genially is really easy to use if you go to the presentation mode. They have lots of free samples there. And then you can include GIFs, interactive images. So if you are exploring a picture with your students, you can have the picture before you start the class. You can have this a beautiful picture, and then you can include some interactive buttons for the students. So then it's like a leading. I use it for a leading moment. So I bring a picture, I ask some questions by using Genially. So it is a tool worth exploring, but then bear in mind, you waste some time just by getting more acquainted with it, but then at the end of the day, it's really worth using it.
No, it's beautiful. I said to Paul halfway through the session, I've got real slide envy because they're so beautiful, and I really like the gifts that are embedded into it as we go through it. There are lots of other questions which we'll get to in a moment. I just want to go back, I think, to something you were talking about with your kind of put two parts of your talk together. Towards the end there, you showed us your toolkit, and then somewhere about halfway through, you mentioned the SAMA model, Punta Dora's model for technology evaluation, which I think some of the audience weren't familiar with. So can we just go back to that first and talk about what the SAMA model is, and then maybe I think as an example, it might fit into this idea of the toolkit that you've talked about. Is that
Yes.
okay? So
Yes, it is. It is. I first got in touch with the summer model back in 2016, 2018. I've attended a talk on implementing technology in the classroom. And the speaker told me that there was Dr. Ruben Puente Dura, that he is a professor and he works with technology. And then he has come up with this model, which is, I'm going to, can I type in here? Do you think it is
into the chat box, yeah,
possible?
if that's where you're going,
Yeah.
yeah, feel free.
Yes, actually the chat box, my chat box so full, I believe that I'm not able to type it. It is still loading the comments here. Yes. But then the summer model stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. According to Dr. Rubin, we have these four steps in which we have to take into account the level of use of technology. So if teachers, they are using just technology to substitute something that they could have done in paper, there isn't much functional improvement in the use of that tool. So there's a video that they say that a class full of iPads without any rationale behind or any functional change for students, it is just a class full of iPads. So how can we use technology to help students with more functional change in the use and in the learn? Is there a learning outcome? So the second step for the summer model is augmentation. We can see that technology was able to provide the students with some functional improvement. So now, not just typing in a document, for example, in a collaborative document such as Google Docs, but typing on this document from Google Docs, but with a little bit of a more functional change. So students now, they are able to make use of the tool, but they are able to use it to collaborate with their peers, or technology there plays a bit of more functional change for them in their experience. The first two steps of the summer model, they enhance the learning outcome, or they enhance the students' experience. The other two steps, which are modification and redefinition, we can see the use of technology in a more transformative way. So when it comes to modification, students are able to use technology, an app or a new tool, but then the technology factor there will allow for more transformation. So by using the technology, if they hadn't used it before, would that task be possible? So the last two stages of the summer model, they use technology as it wouldn't be conceivable. So it would be inconceivable if students didn't use technology. The last two steps for the summer model, they say that students, they start sharing more with their community. So they are able to use technology to reach other people. So by using podcasts or by blogging, by putting together a video, so teachers there, the role of the teacher for the last two steps of the summer model, it is of guidance, helping students to use technology to get a more, not only functional, but a transformative experience for them. I might confess that for one-to-one students, the last step, which is redefinition, that where they would share with their would share their work with other friends and all, it is a bit more difficult because one-to-one students, they tend not to to do so. So for them, it is a bit more difficult. So whenever I wanted to reach this last step by using technology with them, I try to ask them to go to maybe TripAdvisor, share a review on a trip, and then ask their friends to rate it or share on their Facebook or on their Instagram. But then I believe that these decisions that I made to put together my toolkit, they really reflect the summer model. I'm not using technology just for the sake of using it, but to provide my students with a more functional use of technology.
Brilliant. It's such a great explanation. And thank you to, just as you were talking, I think if I remember, it was Alex, Linda and Sheena actually put some links that you were probably trying to type. They also put them in. So people
Yes,
who
I
are
couldn't.
interested
Oh,
in
thank you.
for it. So I presume to a certain extent, I mean, you talked about it from a student point of view there more often than not, but I presume that your toolkit kind of came together as a mix of your understanding of summer and what you wanted the tools to do. with it. Would that be right?
Mm-hmm. Just a second.
You're okay?
There was a cut in the call. Did you ask me anything?
No, I was just saying, I was talking about the toolkit. Presume you were just saying at the end that your toolkit came together because of Sama, or because what you learned of Sama, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yes.
So you did say, and I think this does lead into some of the other questions we've got. You teach one-to-one.
I teach more one-to-one than big groups.
So I think I know the answer to this, but because it's been asked a few times, does everything you've talked about apply to the groups? Do you think it's more difficult to teach groups online than one-to-one?
I do, because then if you need to monitor students, and then if you need to deal with the students' expectations, and if you follow a course book, so it is quite challenging teaching groups online. The things that I've been doing here, I've been applying for one-to-one students, and then small groups like 2 students, 3 students, 4 students, 6 students, but I haven't taught more than 10, 12 students at once. So I believe that teachers who teach groups, their work is doubled, because they needed to bear in mind, they needed to work with the students' expectations and their background, if they needed to investigate what is their digital culture. So it might be useful for groups, but then, as I told you, I'm speaking from the experience that I have more with one-to-one and then very small groups. But then the principles, actually the factors, they might apply for groups as well, because they say that you need to have clear goals, the tools, they need to be interactive, collaborative, feedback oriented, so they might apply for big groups as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of what you've talked about was about things like netiquette, which applies whether it's a one-to-one or a group. And equally, I think the things that you were saying about the teacher and the teacher personality are absolutely relevant. Depend, whether it's one-to-one or if it's adults or if it's kids. You talked about course books, and that does lead to a couple of questions. Do you use? Are you using a what shall I say, typical ELT course book, or and if so, how do you kind of adapt that to the online environment? I think that's where a lot of teachers are struggling at the moment.
Yes. Nowadays, I've been working with 2 main course books. Can I say the names? Can I?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So the one, it is from Macmillan. It is Open Mind series and Mastermind series. I like it because then there are some digital resources for teachers, and then you have grammar presentations. You've got lots of worksheets where you can adapt for your learners. So this is the first factor that I usually take a look at. Can I share this material with the learners? Do I have to adapt a lot? We do have to adapt. So whenever I use Macmillan books, Open Mind series and Mastermind series, I try to include more cultural elements, because I believe that we needed to give a bit more support for that. But I also work with National Geographic books, Outcomes and Life. So I like this too, but I have to adapt as well, because I have access to the digital books. So then I ask my learners to buy it. So then as I have bought it, I receive a digital copy, but I do adapt. So whenever there's an activity where they have to circle or to type in, I try to break it down a bit more. It is a bit time consuming, but it is worth it, because then I see that they really collaborate with me. So I've been using these 2 main books, but I also plan lots of lessons from authentic material. One of my favorite websites, it is Harvard Business Report. So I have some business students, so I go there and then I collect. And Twitter, I really like using Twitter for some of the lessons.
Oh, no, I'm going to ask the question. So how do you use Twitter then? Go on.
I try to check Twitter tweets from famous people. So then I try to work on register, formal, informal, the way the person communicates, so intention, sarcasm. So I try to use to work on some sub skills sometimes. So it's really useful.
Perfect. Great. And do you think there's a lot of people asking questions about what about groups and governments and not providing digital learning, if I understand from or training, but I think you would say that you're fairly, to a certain extent, self-taught in this area. Yeah, you've found that you've developed your skills by taking part, trying, reading, yes, you've got training, as we said at the beginning, but
I did.
so what advice would you give to a teacher that's struggling there? Just go out and read, or
Actually, by error, by trial and error, you needed to test some of the things, but I wouldn't try to test everything because I've developed a bit of FOBO, fear of better option, fear of best option. So there will always be a nice tool to use, but then by exchanging ideas, I took part into some groups of teachers, of online teachers on Facebook. There are lots of groups for online teaching. So I believe by exchanging ideas, by getting I didn't pay much money for courses, so I tried to go for free initiatives first, and then when I see that the course is really worth it, I try to pay for it. But there will always be something new, so by trying things and then by talking to other people and then by trying to analyze the rationale behind it, it's not just for the fireworks. You needed to see, is there going to be any functional improvement if I use this? So this is something of the essence.
yes, I think for me, there's a lot in your talk that resonates with me. But I think for me, when you said, that we're not taking the tool, and it's not the fireworks, it's how practical the tool is, and not just changing all the tools simply because, sticking with the tools that one has are the important parts. Well, I think after grilling you for 15 minutes and the presentation, I think it's time to kind of bring us to an end there. So I'm sure the audience, both on Facebook and here in the room, would like to give you a very big round of applause for a really marvelous talk with so much advice. And I'm really pleased that you didn't argue about getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning and delivering it to us. So it's we much appreciate all your I think practical ideas, and the fact that you were talking from the heart, I think made it more memorable to a lot of people. So there's her Google Classroom link that's just shot across there. Tammy has invited you to go and join in that community. So those of you looking who are saying, how do I find out more? How do I get training? How do I practice stuff? How have I got, what did you call it? FOMO, whatever.
Yeah, FOBO, fear of best option, fear of a better option.
Fear of a better option. Then I suggest now is a good time to go join that Google Classroom as your starting point. So once again, thank you very much, Tammy, for joining in with us. I guess the good thing about talking so early in the morning is now you've got the rest of the day to enjoy. So
I do. I'll teach some lessons and some teachings.
Oh, okay. Wow. There's a dedicated professional for you. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm going to stop the recording now and hand over